Oh, trust me, it was. She didn't answer her phone. Hey, you.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm awesome.
There's a different color.
It always is. Gotta keep you guessing.
I just happened to down there sitting down all these guys I know come from. Yeah.
As the study of the relationships between organisms and their interactions with their environment, ecology not only changed how I looked at myself, but also how I viewed other people and the many animals I encountered while on the water. Suddenly, the activity of fly fishing had become an opportunity to speculate, wonder, and reflect on the seamlessness and grandeur of life. Ecology became the antidote to my mystic trance. Although this change in perspective characterizes Part 2, Deep Water, like the speaker of Theodore Roethke's poem, The Waking, I take my waking slow. I gradually began to appreciate the relational logic of life's complexity. I had, in effect, become a naked searcher. Instead of seeking alternative transcendental truths, I wondered how I fit into the natural scheme of things, together with the trout and the mayflies and whatever lives unseen beneath the water. Of all the things I discovered, the most important is that I belong to the earth and to the water and was born of processes and according to natural laws to which every living thing is subject. This discovery was not necessarily a negation of mystical wonder, but it did make mystical interpretations seem a bit down the river. Thus, Part 3, The Afterglow, tends to embody this more realistic orientation to life. However much this book may differ from other books, at the end of the day, these are fly fishing stories. Alternately narrative, meditative, and lyrical. Every one of these stories has fish in it, and sunlight, clean air, rain, and birdsong, and the grassy riverbanks and lakesides where I often sit in the prime of life, chewing a blade of sweet grass, watching the water and daydreaming and barely knowing the difference. So now I'm going to read Angler's Ball. And this essay is, where is it? This essay is dedicated to Jeff Metcalf. Let's get a tag of this water here. Thanks, Frank.
Didn't know if you saw it.
Thank you. I hope that's the solution. I say in this sort of groggily, strange voice. I'm kind of liking the tones of my voice right now. It's kind of a grumbly sort of. It's very, very low and.
Working for you.
Okay, that's good. Let's leave it to my sister now.
You could work in radio, Max. Absolutely.
Okay, Angler's Ball. This is for Metcalf. When my children were in the first water of the womb, Kim and I would periodically eavesdrop on them with the ultrasound. I remember the tiny sprigs that would become hands and feet, the cartoonish skulls, the seahorse-shaped bodies. And in the midst of it all was a crisp dash of blinking light, the electrical beating of their fierce and infinitesimal hearts. This flash of light pulses deep within living things, and so even when death finally alights, it must insinuate itself, like a thief picking its way into the locked rooms of the body, until finally it reaches the last place, which, though diminutive, contains just enough light to write a letter by. Enough to lead us out of the now darkened house and along the moonless lake shore. My own death is calling to me, but the sounds of the river fill my ears so that I cannot hear it. Last summer I invited Death to go fishing on the Weber River. On the way there we listened to Morning Edition on NPR. The stories were sadly familiar. A suicide bomber killed himself and 40 other men, women, and children in a market in Baghdad. 2 American soldiers were killed by a roadside bomb that had been stuffed into the chest of a dead dog. The body of a missing college girl was found inside her car in a river near her hometown. That's a fine trout river, Des says. World class. Then he takes a bite of muffin and chases it with a gulp of coffee. On this particular morning, northbound on Interstate 15, Death is visiting my friend, Jeff Metcalf. Feeling him out, trying to read his light level. Too much light, Death will hit the road. Too little is like an invitation to lay out the bedroll. I turned off the radio. Had your fill? Metcalf asks. I could see the barn swallows feeding above the apple orchards. My fill? Jeff nods and offers me a thermos top of coffee. Yeah, he says, his thick beard hiding his mouth. I shoot the coffee and then hand back the top. Will things change if I say I have? When we get to the river, I turn onto the tractor road and park above the water. Damn, I say, flows are way down. Metcalf leans over and looks out the window. It does look low, maybe 60 CFS. I open the door, step out, and stretch. Something like that. Lower than I've ever seen it. Although I'm soon busy rigging up, I'm still mindful of Metcalf. I note the 6-foot, 3-weight Winston rod, the oversized duffel bags whose contents to this day remain a mystery, and at the end of it all, a squiggly 3-foot spike of line that resembles a pig's tail tied with a single fly. "What do you have in there?" I ask as Metcalf rummages through the back of his vest. "What I have in there, Maxie boy, is lunch. Take this," he says, tossing me what must be just under a pound of sandwich, expertly wrapped in tinfoil. I can tell this ain't no PB&J. Metcalf looks at me hard. "Oh, no, 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 my brother," he says, holding aloft his sandwich. "This is pesto and Parma prosciutto, melted Parmesan and sautéed peppers on toasted panini, with a drizzle of 100-year-old balsamic vinegar." He says all this as if it were an Italian melody, as if he tasted the words, their ultimately sweet and salty music. I drop the sandwich into the back of my vest. I say thank you, but I'm thinking, how can this be, Metcalf? How can he be so goddamn beautiful and alive and still be dying before my very eyes? Sorry. We walk above the river, careful to avoid a remnant braid of barbed wire that weaves in and out of the tall yellow grass. I need some contrast, so I look down through the vegetation and glimpse the sun on the Weber. In the low light of morning, the water appears milky and slightly golden. For a moment, I am awash in happiness. I debate whether to say anything to Metcalf. Somehow it seems callous to remind him of how beautiful the world is, now that he is preparing to leave it. I decide to merely point to the river and say, "Look." When Metcalf doesn't respond, I figure he has stopped to admire the golden water. "I knew you'd like," I say, turning back. But Metcalf is not there. I scan the river and see him through the trees, fishing the milky strand of water. He looks up at me and I wave. "You're way ahead of me, man." He smiles and puts his left hand to his ear. I shake my head and wave nothing. Metcalf nods and gets back to work. Watching him down there with that 6-foot rod, working maybe 10 feet of water, his body leaning toward the river with each cast, head slightly tilted, as if he were both looking and listening. I realized how intimate fly fishing can be, how immediate and near, and how oftentimes the farther I cast, the further away I get from myself and from the intensity of the moment. That's the trouble with moments. There are only so many of them. I also sometimes find that those moments already lived are still alive, or would like to be, and that is why we experience the passage of time. Snow can fall on a mountain stream and evoke a feeling whose age cannot be known. This is one difference between memory and nostalgia. Nostalgia is generally painful because it is often without precise referent. It is like autumnal air and autumnal light, wind blowing dry red leaves into the streets. Which is why I feel grateful when I reach that place where the Weber narrows and slows along its southern bank. There I remember the exhilaration of catching a big rising brown some 15 summers ago. Perhaps death is light receding, and the past is a faint glow that travels however far and lights the present moment. This is what I find each time I come to the Weber, or to any river with which I share a history. As Metcalf works his line, I walk a few yards along the path and gaze upriver. The trees on either side are thick with morning mist and bird song. I have walked this path over 100 times, alone and with friends, many of whom are now gone. Not dead gone, but gone just the same. When I get to be as old as Metcalf, gone will assume new meanings, and most will be final. I have to thank the river. I have to thank Metcalf and my older friends for showing me how life changes as it starts to wind down. I can't see much of the future when I look at my friends my age. But with Metcalf, I can see myself in 20 years, and so I prepare and I plan. It is a strange day. The sky is starting to cloud up, and I can't shake the idea that whatever animates Metcalf is slowly leaving him. A few caddisflies appear above the water. One alights on my thumb, crawls to my wrist, and then flies away.